Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesandgrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesandgrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching and listening to Heroes in Grief today. And you're going to be glad you did, because today I have Mark Anthony with me. I have an awesome introduction for him that I'm going to read for you here, okay? Mark Anthony, JD Psychic Explorer, also known as the Psychic Lawyer, is a fourth-generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. He's an Oxford-educated attorney licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. Mark was named a notable graduate by the Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science in England. He's a Spiritual Awakenings International Circle of Honor honoree and was awarded the Visionary of the Year by Best Holistic Life and the Omi Award for Best Psychic Medium. Mark appears nationwide on TV and radio, including CBS TV's The Doctor's Gaia TV and Discovery Channel. He co-hosts the award-winning live stream show, The Psychic in the Dock, on Transformation Network. The Psychic Explorer travels to mystical locations and remote corners of the world to examine ancient mysteries and supernatural phenomena. He's a featured speaker at conferences, expos, and universities, which include Brown, Columbia, Harvard, and Yale. Mark Anthony is the author of 3 best-selling books. His latest, The Afterlife Frequency, has won multiple awards, ranked as one of the top books about faith, and was up for a Pulitzer. His other best-selling books are Never Letting Go and Evidence of Eternity. He is also a VIP executive contributor for Best Holistic Life magazine. Now, join our conversation with Mark Anthony. We're rolling already, so I just casual conversation. If that's all right with you, sit back, relax.
I like casual conversation. That works for me.
Yeah. I'm sure you can use the time. That's for sure. So, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. You got a busy schedule.
That's fine.
I know that. So, Mark, I want to start by confessing to you. All right. So,
Okay.
Man to man here. I was at the Helping Parents Heal conference in Phoenix in August. And of course, you were a speaker there. And so, at the conferences, you can pick and choose the what you would like to do and then go to things. And I got to confess to you, because of your associations with so many great people and things like that, that I had this preconceived notion that you were the Hollywood glitz type or whatever, you know? So I don't go for that very much. I'm just sort of like, down to earth and all of that. So I was not going to go to your presentation. And so I did go, and I got to tell you, Mark, you were one of the most genuine people that I've seen. And it really
Thank
changed my heart and toward you. But I wanted to confess to you because of my stupid preconceived notions, how you have things or whatever. But
Well, that's interesting. So, what led you to that conclusion?
I don't know. You're a good looking guy. Your photos are good, for your promos, all that kind of stuff. And I know you've been associated with, been on big TV shows and all of that. And I just had that association for some reason. So,
Well, I do appear on a lot of TV shows. I'm going to be in a Discovery Channel show coming up this season called Destinations of the Damned. It's one of Zach Bagans' new shows, and it's interesting because they brought me in as the medium to do an investigation in this abandoned sanatorium in Indiana. And it was the site of what they believe was a murder suicide. But what I was picking up was quite different, that it was a double murder made to look like a murder suicide. And then, of course, I've been on The Doctors and Gaia TV, and I do a lot of regional television. But, and when you do all that, you got to have, the press materials and everything together. But it's interesting because for me, the biggest stars that I've met, and I do readings for some pretty famous people, they're the most down to earth
hmm.
people. They don't go around like, oh, look at me, I am a star. It's like one of my clients, and I have her permission to say this, is Hilary Swank. And, she's won 2 Academy Awards. Winning one is just unbelievable, but winning 2, she is the nicest, most genuine person. It's just, I can't say enough good things about her. And I met, Alexander Skarsgård. He was in True Blood, Generation Killed, Big Little Lies. He played Tarzan a couple
Oh,
years
yeah.
ago.
Okay.
The guy, he definitely built like Tarzan. It was funny because I met him at an event. He goes, hey, you want to take a selfie? And I'm like, yeah, And so he puts his arm around me. I put my arm around him, and I could feel his abs. And I'm like, man, I really need to get back to the gym. And a friend of mine, a comedian, jumps in and goes, yo, Tarzan, do a selfie. And we're all laughing. And it was just like 3 dudes hanging out laughing.
I thought you were going to tell me like he picked you up or something.
He probably could have, but he was just a really, really, really nice guy.
It's great to hear. It's good to hear.
Yeah.
People need to know that. And that I was going to lead into something with that too, because of all of that, and you have those associations and everything, you have a lot of things going on, incredible things, and you're doing wonderful things. And we'll get more into all of that. But so you're on your schedule, you're rushing around, going crazy, and you got these big things happening. And, that's, I was thinking about you coming on this podcast, and I just like to be laid back and just talk about things man to man, or, whatever, casual conversation, and so your heart, I know you're going to tell some of your story here, but your heart toward things when you got some quiet time and you just sit back and you realize everything that's going on around you and all of these things, where does your heart really lie?
With my family.
Hmm.
They're the people that mean the most to me in the world, and they should. It should for everybody. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because about a half hour ago, I've been working on a presentation that I'm going to be giving for a conference later this year. And I just wanted to go out front and just do some deep breathing, because it's a really nice day here. And I started thinking about my parents. And, being a medium, I start feeling them around, and I really miss them in the material world. Yes, I can connect with them spiritually, but I really, really miss them. But, and I think about my brother and my sister, who, thank God, are here in this world. And we got a whole little crop of new family members, 3 little girls and a little boy now.
Aww.
And they're what makes makes life good. That's where my heart goes.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. Of course, everybody knows that. So, do you have a grief story to tell that's kind of led you along this path, thing, of everything that you're doing? And um,
Yeah. Um, Both my parents had mediumistic abilities, and it runs in my family for generations. I've tracked it back into the 1890s, and the two sides of the family, Tom, could not be more different. My dad's family, they were waspy Pennsylvania Baptists. Okay, they were, very but my dad had three sisters and a brother, and one of his sisters, Marjorie, was a medium like he was, as was their mother Isabel and maternal grandmother Grace. And my dad was a Navy SEAL, so he wasn't some airy fairy fruity tooty guy. I mean, he was just, and no offense to the airy fairy fruity tooty crowd, a lot of my friends are, but dad was like the toughest. I mean, he was a Navy SEAL, okay, but a very loving guy. And my mother's family, they had come over from Italy. Her father was actually born in Italy, and they were Catholic, and they really embraced their abilities. And so my dad met my mom at a USO dance, and they just clicked. And she was a good Italian Catholic girl, so they would only meet at these dances, and it was all chaperoned. And then she told him, she said, "Well, I see spirits." And he said, and he replied the way only a sailor could, with a number of colorful metaphors, followed by, "I do too." And I was very close with my parents. Mom and I just, and dad, they were like my best friends too. And I was in my law office, and one day, and I was thinking about spaghetti. No, not unusual for an Italian boy to think about spaghetti. And my secretary said, "Your mother's on the line." So I picked up the phone. She said, "Hey, honey, I just made some spaghetti. Why don't you come over for lunch?" And I said, "Oh, that's great, And my parents, they were only about 5 miles from my office, so I drove over there. Mom looked tired that day. Dad was all right, but I was kind of concerned. She looked tired, but we had a really wonderful time. And before I left, and Tom, I will never forget this. She hugged me and she said, "I love you so much. I'm so thankful you're my son."
Mm.
And I said, "I love you too, Mom." And I kissed her and on a cheek, and I left. But something, when you grow up in a family of psychics, you're always used to having these, sensations. I thought something, though, wasn't right. And so the next day I was in court, and the judge's assistant said, "Mark, we need you in the judge's chambers right now."
Mm.
And I go in there, and I take the phone, and my secretary's on the phone. She's crying. And she said, "Your dad called. Your mom died."
Whoa.
Wham. Well, and heroes of grief. I mean, people tuning into this, you all know that feeling where you feel like your chest is caving in, and like you just been sucked down into the deepest depths. And then there's that disbelief, like, please tell me this isn't real, that I'm going to get another call that, oh, the paramedics resuscitated her. And she passed from what's known as a ventricular fibrillation. That's where the electrical system in your heart wears down, and then it gives out. And yes, it's a peaceful passing, but still. Well, about 3 weeks after that, Tom, I was driving back from court, and you know how those waves of grief hit you? You think you got your act together and you've kind of stabilized. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to court. I can't be like crying and stuff. But I was in my car, and all of a sudden one of those waves hit. And so I knew I needed to pull over, and I figured, let me get my act together, because I was a senior partner in the firm, and I can't walk in to, my office in tears and all that, as much as And so I'm in this parking space, and all of a sudden this flash of light goes off. And to this day, I'm not sure, was it in the car or in my head? And I instinctively turned to the passenger seat, and I saw my mother's silhouette in this silver white light for like a second. and her voice fills my head. And I hear her say, Mark, you've been given the gift of mediumship so that you would not be crushed by grief, but now you must help those who are suffering with theirs. All right. So Tom, like I'm like now I'm breaking out in a sweat and I'm trying to process this. And then I hear what she said next. It is your life's mission to help people understand that God exists, that heaven exists, that souls are immortal living beings, that humans can communicate with souls, and that we will all be reunited when it is your time to leave the material world in the light that you call God.
Hmm.
I sink back into the seat in my car, soaking wet. And all I can say is, okay. And I'm sitting there going, I can't tell anybody this. They're going to think I'm insane. I mean, people already thought I was weird enough as it is because I pick up on spirits and I kind of knew things that I shouldn't have known in court and all that, because that's part of being a psychic medium. But this was not one of these subtle spiritual events on a mountaintop in Maui. This was a fire hose right to the face. And so the thing is, Tom, from that point onward, my life changed radically. Within a year, I was already out of the practice of law. And that's an interesting story, too, but I don't want to keep going on and on. But you asked, like, well, do I have a grief story that led me on this path? Oh, yeah. And not only did the door didn't open, I went right through it, took the door jamb and the hinges with me. And the thing is, I realized at that moment, my first reaction was, don't tell anybody about this. And then the second one was, nothing's ever going to be the same. And it hasn't been. So that's what started me on this path.
Well, yeah, don't tell anybody about it, but you got to tell everybody about it.
Got to tell everybody about it. It was no longer time because, see, when I was a little kid, I first started seeing spirits around 3.5. And I remember mom going, oh, he's got it. And dad going, once again, the colorful expletives followed by, he's got it. And the thing is, my dad was afraid for me because that's another long story. But he used to tell me, you can talk to your mother and I about this, but don't tell anybody else. And as I got older, and I went to Catholic school, and I thought, they got saints and angels and all these invisible things. But then when I started listening to the other things they were saying, I realized Dad was right. Let's keep this quiet.
So amazing. Excuse me. I was wondering too. So how old were you when that happened with your mom?
That was, let me see. Mom has been in spirit now, good Lord, 19 years. So that was 19 years ago.
Wow.
So I was a full-on adult. I mean, I was the senior partner of a law firm. By that time, I'd tried 100 jury trials. I was always, I started school when I was 5. I graduated high school at 17, college at 19, law school at 22. I was always like the youngest person in my class. And so a lot happened very quickly in my career. I mean, by the time I was 30, I was a senior partner in a law firm. And I'd always been involved in all these major events and things. And I've seen that it has all been very, very important and part of what I do. I've always been a public speaker. I mean, since I was a little kid, I used to love show and tell and all that. But that's one of the gifts that I have is public speaking, presentations. I like doing research and reading, and I like teaching. I like helping people. And so when people think, well, how can you be a lawyer? How can you be a medium? Both jobs are about helping people. Look, I know people don't like lawyers. I mean, I spent enough of my life as a lawyer because, when you go to a lawyer, is it because things are good? No, it's because someone's been arrested or you're getting sued or you're injured or there's a contract dispute. People go to lawyers because of problems. And so there's a lot of negativity surrounded with the legal profession. But lawyers help people. And when I was practicing law, I helped people through the most difficult times of their lives. What do I do as a medium? I facilitate communication between people here in this world and their loved ones in spirit. In other words, grieving people. I mean, you're a shining light, Dad.
Hmm.
Okay. Working with helping parents heal is one of the greatest honors of my life. I can't think of a group that needs um, connections with the other side, and more than that, I mean, there is no loss that nothing comes close to losing a child. It's crushing and it's devastating. So when I left the practice of law to become a full-time medium, I had a number of transferable skills, which I believe are very useful to what I'm doing now.
I thought it was interesting. You talked about how you've always been kind of in the forefront of things. I've described myself that way too. And sometimes I was a pastor for a long time. I was a hospice director, a spiritual care
Wow.
director. So did speaking there. I was in supervisory or management positions almost every single job I've ever had. And then I was in music for 15 years as a front man and everything else. So um, it's a blessing and it's a curse, right? And I really can kind of identify with you feeling that because your heart is there, and then there's this other side that's just out there all the time, and it's almost like, oh my gosh, here I go again. I'm put in this position again to be in the forefront somehow. And that happened again. My son Jeff passed. It'll be 2 years on the 23rd of February here, and
I'm sorry.
and thank you. And so I was doing music at that time, full time, and everything was going great. That happened. Your world blows apart. I come back and I felt very humbled, very desiring to help, and that's what I wanted to do. I knew I changed, obviously. In some ways, it was a change. In other ways, it really wasn't, because although I was doing music, it's a passion. It's not the passion, and so the other helpful things that I've done in the past kind of, or led me to saying, I want to help people in this position too. And so I didn't know how that was going to happen, but that's where the podcast came out of and things like this. And here I am right in the forefront again, it seems, and I just finally resolved and said, well, apparently this is what I'm made to be. So, and,
Right.
and, and you carry, your changed heart with that, and allow that to kind of hopefully come out in what you're doing.
And it takes a lot of courage to get up on stage and perform. It's amazing, but once again, you too have all these transferable skills that went into what you're doing now. And I'm a firm believer that, we're not just thrown into the mix haphazardly. I believe that we all have a life's journey. And the hardest thing, I think, Tom, for parents to understand is, why did my child die? I mean, people say, well, everything's for a reason. It's like, well, what reason is there? What sense is there? Because we're supposed to go first, not the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're supposed to go first. And so when a child dies, it upsets the whole natural order of the universe, except for the fact that that is part of what happens. And I think one of the most overwhelming things about being involved with helping parents heal. I mean, when I stepped on that stage and I looked at 1,100 parents who've lost children and thinking this is only a minute fraction of the parents on this planet who've lost children, it's so overwhelming to realize how many parents in the world have lost children, and how difficult it is. I was doing a reading for a woman the other day, and she told me so many things I've heard from all the Shining Light parents. Is that, well, after my daughter died, my friends all drifted away. They felt uncomfortable around me. They didn't want to talk to me. They acted as if they would catch it,
Mm.
as if death was contagious. And she said, I can't relate to anybody. And she and her husband were having trouble because she felt he wasn't grieving enough. And that's one of the things, because I work a lot with men. That's why I welcome the opportunity being on this podcast. Men, we have tear ducts, hearts, and feelings for a reason. And we do hurt every bit as much as women do. We just display it differently. We tend to internalize. Plus, we've been socialized to suppress our
Yes.
feelings. But that doesn't mean they're not there. But the problem is the wife or the mother grieves one way, the father grieves another, and then there's this tension. Then there's the way they need to grieve as a unit, as parents. Then, if there are surviving children, there's the way the interaction and the dynamic between the surviving child or children with the parents. And many of the surviving children start to feel marginalized because it seems like mom and dad loved the child who died more than me because that's all they ever focus on. Then it gets even more complicated if divorce is involved or it's a blended family. Now, who could not possibly be overwhelmed by any part of that? And so confronting, talking, expressing grief is important. It's important.
Yeah, I have a real heart for that. That's growing out of all of this. And like with my, I guess, gifts, you would say, to get in front of people and everything, I have a real heart to get out and speak on that exact issue right there. That we need to normalize the grief conversation. We need to get it into wellness programs before the grief happens. And everybody's going to experience it. So I think that the grievers themselves can be better educated beforehand to anticipate things, and that people around a grieving person too, that can help them immensely, because they don't know what to do, or they don't understand that when they ask the question, how are you doing, you might get an honest answer, and you better be ready for that, to approach someone with compassion and care if you're going to ask that type of question. But yes, I think we could be more proactive in the grief conversation, and it could really help people. And so I have a heart for that, to try to do that. That is a glass ceiling out there for sure, because I notice we have a huge underground, and everybody's, people say this to me. They say, Tom, it's amazing what you're doing with the podcast and all of this, but there's a lot of podcasts out there on grief, and there's a lot of books out there, and there's a lot of resources out there, but it's an underground because like you said, our society suppresses it and keeps it down, and people aren't even aware of it. And when I talk about those things, they think my podcast is the only one out there on it. And that's just ridiculous. There's hundreds out there. And so, yeah, I think we could just do a better job, get it into educational programs, pre events. We can certainly be reactive with it, but I think we should be proactive with it too.
Absolutely. I'm working on an article now for the June issue of Best Holistic Life magazine, and June is dedicated to men's health. And the article is entitled, "A Real Man is Not Afraid to Cry." And I'm writing about why men need to cry. And without giving away too much in the article, studies at University of Southern California, University of Pittsburgh, the Ramsey Medical Center in Minneapolis have found that tears of grief are different than reflex tears. Reflex tears are like when you're chopping an onion or you smell some, pollen or something and your eyes start to tear. Because it's reflex because you're reacting. It's a reflex to eye irritation. And reflex tears are 98% water, whereas tears of grief tears, contain the hormones that cause depression and sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you cry, you're actually getting out of your body the chemicals that cause grief. But there's more to it. Once you start crying, it triggers the production of endorphins. So on one hand, you're getting the tears of grief out through your tear ducts. You're purging your body of the funk and gunk that's making you sad and depressed. And then it's triggering endorphins, which are the feel-good hormones that take the edge off grief. And then the physical activity of crying activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the PNS, which makes you relaxed. And so that's why after a good cry, you do feel it's like you're a can of soda or a beer that you're shaking up, shaking up, shaking up, and it's going to explode. And you got to let it out. And that's why after a good cry, you feel somewhat relieved and exhausted too. So crying is actually a very healthy thing. And guys, girls cry, boys don't. A real man doesn't cry. Okay, this is drilled into us. My dad, though, the Navy SEAL, he taught me after my mom died. He said to me, "A real man is never afraid to cry for someone he loves who died." And my dad is as real a man and tough a guy as you were ever going to meet. And it's important for us to know that. Also, we do cry, and more than people might think. In fact, a study by Harvard recently came out that said women cry an average of 3.5 times a month, and men cry 1.9 times a month. Now, crying doesn't always mean you have to sit there and the tears are streaming. A lot of times when I cry, it only lasts a few seconds. It's just like it's like a little explosion. And I admit there are times I cry, and I'm glad that I do, because it's taking that can and letting that tension out. That's important, because if you don't, it builds up, and then you will release it in other ways: anger, hatred, violence, road rage. So crying is important. And what I try to teach men is you don't have to be, do it in public. Go to your man cave, okay? Whether it's your basement, my office is my man cave, but I like nature. I'll go out and walk around in the woods or along the beach, and I'll have my moment where I shed some tears. Our cars are good. Not when you're driving. Park somewhere, shed some tears. Can last a couple minutes, maybe even a few seconds, but let it happen, because it is psychologically, it's emotionally, mentally, and physically the healthy thing to do. And it's nothing to be embarrassed about.
Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy Magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy Magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue, or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine, or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
And now back to our episode. Yeah, I love the physical aspect brought into grief, because actually Sandra Champlain, she in her book, We Don't Die, in the grief chapter, she talks about the physical aspect of grief and how it actually causes chemical changes in the brain, and that we're missing those receptors. And that's why we have grief brain, and we have all these other things. And so, yes, talking about bringing the physical into when you're trying to get better with things, and that helps raise that the endorphin level that you're talking about and everything, to help the enzymes connect better again and get all back together. And so, so many people get freaked out when they're grieving, and they think they're going crazy. And some of these things are part of the process. And so it can put them really at ease, and it can help. So education on this at any time is a great thing.
Yeah, grief. Sandra's a friend. She's a friend of mine and a colleague. And grief is not mental illness. It's part of the human condition. Now, if you find yourself that you're crying, like let's say the first couple weeks after somebody dies, you're crying every day. That's one thing. A year later, if you're still crying every day, that could be a symptom of an underlying problem that you should talk to somebody about. Okay. But crying now and again, like I was I was in Virginia Beach and I was speaking at the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment at their Ancient Mysteries
Hmm.
conference because I'm a paranormal investigator and ancient mysteries. And I was speaking on the secrets, mysteries, and curse of Tutankhamun, the curse of King Tut's tomb. Really fascinating stuff. But I had a day off, after the conference before I had to fly home. And I was with my manager, Rocky, and you may have met her. She travels with me. And there's a lighthouse in Virginia Beach, and it's on the naval base. And I always liked lighthouses, and so we thought, well, let's go check out the lighthouse. So we go there, and of course, on the naval base, so they got to check everything in your bag and all this. And they had this guy come out, and he was in the Navy, and a real nice guy, and he was talking about the history of the lighthouse. He's kind of the historian, but he was also like fixing all this stuff. And so Rocky and I, we checked out the lighthouse and the beach, and we came back and we saw this sailor, and he was working on. So he was a 20-year man. He was probably about 40 years old, and I just felt drawn to talk to him. And I said, hey, I really appreciated what you said about the history, and I told him, what I was doing there, and all of a sudden, his dad's spirit came to me. Now, it's important for mediums not to just go up and fling readings
Hmm.
at people because you need to respect people's boundaries. And I said, if I may ask, did your dad pass? And he looks at me and goes, yeah. I go, did he die from a terrible lung condition, lung disease? He goes, yeah. And I said, look, if I'm offending you, he goes, no, no, no. I want to hear what you got to say. And his dad came through and he gave several messages, but I said, your dad wants you to know that you never disappointed him and how proud you were of him. And he went like this. He was crying internally. And then his dad started talking about his sons. I go, you got two sons and one of them's a real behavior problem. He goes, oh, yeah. Your dad said, be patient, give him time, it'll stop.
Hmm.
And he goes, thank you. Now, this guy was, he was as tough a guy as you're ever going to meet. And he needed that. And that's one of the beautiful, beautiful things about spirit communication is many times spirits, I call it spiritual synchronicity. It's one of the concepts that I've developed in my books, Evidence of Eternity and the Afterlife Frequency, how spirits will kind of guide you to be in the right place at the right time. Look, I wanted to go look at a lighthouse that day with Rocky. I was off the psychic clock. We were just having a day, and all of a sudden it was like, oh no, this guy really needed this connection. And that's what is so beautiful about helping parents heal, because spirit communication is an integral part of the journey through grief. And what I also like about helping parents heal is, yes, mediumship and spirit communication is part of it, but there's other parts too. You have to acknowledge the reality of the death. That's a hard one.
Hmm.
I mean, so many people, well, I want my family back. I want my son back. I want my daughter back. I'm sure that you do. I have no doubt that you do. But you have to acknowledge the reality of the passing. And through that acknowledgement, you will come to accept the pain of the passing. And through that acceptance, at some point, you'll begin to find inner peace. Now, inner peace does not mean, oh, I'm all happy. But what it means is you're on the road to beginning to learn to live with the loss. Nothing is ever going to fill that hole. Nothing is ever going to make it all better, but you have got to get to the point where you can move forward in life. And it is very difficult. Grief is a lifetime journey. I don't like to say this, but it's the truth. It's a path no one wants to take, but one we are shoved down at some point in our lives.
Yeah. And I thank you as myself, a shining light parent, like you said, from helping parents heal. Thank you. You're I had Farrah Gibson on as well, and neither one of you have lost children. And talk to Farah about why she's associated with it, and her heart is totally into it. And I appreciate yours too, and I thank you from my heart that you bring your gifts to everything that we have there, because those outside resources mean a lot to us. Excuse me. I think that we get in our circles and we share everything together and everything, and I see all of us kind of, sometimes it isn't this way in helping parents, but it seems like it could be, where you're almost like wallowing in it together, and it's nice to
And
get,
that's okay.
it is all right. But it's nice to get the outside viewpoint and your passion that you bring to it, and to help us realize that, where we are, for one thing, like you just said, we need to know exactly where we are, what has happened, acknowledge that, and so that we can get our foundation back under us and start moving forward in whatever way that is. So you help us do that from the outside. At least it does for me. I can just speak for myself. But that's what I see happening from that side. You're not opportunist, anything like that. It's just that, no, you have a heart for what's happening there. And Farah said when she got around us, and it just grew in her because of what we're experiencing and everything. And so it's very unique. Like you said, grief is a strange, strange thing. I sit there and psychoanalyze it all the time, because I can be moving along pretty well, and then of course the Jack in the Box comes out, and there you are. And that crying that's welling up for me, I well up in my eyes or whatever, and you get that, that thrust that just comes through. And
Right.
yeah, it happens. And it does happen to me when I'm driving. Unfortunately, I drive almost all
Yeah,
day, but
driving's an interesting phenomenon because we have 5 different brainwave frequencies. We have gamma, that's when you're on Final Jeopardy and your brain's cranking and you're really figuring it out. And then there's beta, that's our activities of daily living. And then as you shift from beta to alpha, and that's where you drift off into dreamful sleep, at theta. And then there's delta, which is when your body's healing when it's asleep. And the alpha theta border, it's around 8 hertz, because these can be measured, is the daydream state. And that's when psychic and mediumistic activity occurred. And what's going on is when you're driving, that's a very left-brained activity. The left brain is the logical side of your brain, and that's what controls logic, spatial relationships, intensity. So your left brain is all engaged in driving, and your right brain, that's the groovy baby creative esoteric script. It's like, okay, it doesn't have anything to do. And then it starts, drifting into, that's where you start thinking about the emotional things, and you may feel the presence of your son
yeah.
with you at that time. So did he have anything like with his teeth? Did he have some real issue with his teeth, Jeff?
No, not really.
Interesting, because since you've been talking about, I've been feeling issues with my teeth, unless someone close to you or somebody else is going through stuff with your teeth.
Not that I can think of yet, but I will keep thinking about it for sure.
Yeah, think about that. Somebody's got some issues going on with their teeth, because I'm feeling it on the right side, upper teeth, like kind of mid toward the back.
I will look into that. I did notice that I was looking at Judy's son has a daughter, and that's our granddaughter. I'm Papa to her, and I was looking at her. She's going through. She's 6 years old, so she's got, some are falling out, some are coming in, and I looked at them, and I was wondering, in my mind, I was thinking, are they going to come in right? Is that happening right? I just didn't. It did look kind of messed up, so perhaps that's
okay. There you go. See, very good, because you just did exactly what you need to do during readings. When a piece of information is transmitted to me by a spirit, it is not always about the spirit. It can relate to somebody, you or somebody close to you, and immediately you made the connection. So what does this mean? This means Jeff is around you and aware that this is happening. I'm just going to call her your granddaughter, because it's all about love. You can get married, get a piece of paper, whatever, but she's still your granddaughter. Yeah. Okay. And so that's how he's letting you know that he's around and aware of what's happening. I'm going to go a little bit further here. Just keep an eye on this, because it feels like there might be a complication with her teeth. It doesn't mean it's going to be real serious, but it's just something I'd rather err on the side of caution. If I'm wrong, well, then her baby teeth fell out, and if I'm right, well, then you'll know to take her to the
I
dentist.
appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. And that has happened with me driving. Okay. So, again, background here. My mom passed a couple years before Jeff, and 95 years old and good life. My brother was into near death experiences, so he told me about them. I started investigating them and immediately kind of looked at what the scientists and doctors were saying about it. I wanted to know from the top. I was very much into it, and I used to talk to Jeff about those things too. So when Jeff passed, after the initial phases, I started really seeking out the spirit world and looking into meditation and trying to raise my vibration levels to connect with him and all of those things. And one time, one of the most poignant times that it happened, I was listening to just frequency music that you can get on YouTube, and I was driving. And I was driving. I drive for a charter company here, and I was driving out in these back roads, and I was going, and it was taking me a little time. And so I put that music on, and I know you're not supposed to when you're driving because you don't want to.
They tell you that. Yeah, do not do this while driving.
Yes,
That's
I just wanted some mindfulness time. It really is what it was. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden, I see, and I told this on Sandra's podcast. I said, I saw this little thing. You know how the holograms come up now on the windows, and it shows you the speed and all those kind of things and everything.
Yeah.
So there was a little rectangle there, and I see Jeff in the corner. And he's just waving like, here I am, Dad, I'm here. Because I was just, you get out of sorts in this grief thing. And sometimes I would just want to center, and I just want to say, this is true. This stuff that I believe in, I believe he's there, all these things. And he's just saying, it's a confirmation. He's Dad, I'm here. And I'll shorten it. I started seeing all the people that I remember important to me that passed in my life in this little group in a rectangle. And they're all just like saying, we're here, confirming things. And so that's that right brain, left thing while you're driving. And I did notice too, I was totally focused on driving. And because I thought about it, I thought, wait a minute, you don't want to be like spacing out here. And so, but I noticed I was totally intent and focused on driving while all this was happening. It was very interesting that you talked about the left side and right side, and that just makes sense there for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Our brain is a fascinating device, but what people need to realize, and I do a lot of work with consciousness studies, is that the human brain did not create your soul. It merely hosts it. And one of the concepts I developed is known as the electromagnetic soul, because the brain is only 2% of the body's weight, but it uses over 20% of the electrical energy. And so it's like your computer hard drive did not create the programs on it. It merely hosts them. And every great faith teaches you that the soul pre-exists the body, comes into the body, moves on after the body dies. Laws of thermodynamics and physics, energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. So I'll spare the lengthy technical explanation, but I developed the electromagnetic soul to explain what we really are, which is a spirit that is pure consciousness, the who and what we are, which is eternal electromagnetic energy. But the brain is still a formatting device. So while our electromagnetic soul's housed in the brain has to control our motor functions and all these things, and it does. When the left brain's engaged in something like driving, the right brain tends to, and what happened there was because the EMS is electromagnetic energy, the afterlife frequency, which is what I call the other side, they will adjust their frequency, which begins to interface with yours, and voila, there you saw all your loved ones in spirit. They figured, oh, look, Tom's receptive. Let's pop in and say hi. And they do things like that.
Yeah.
They do things like that.
I wanted more, that's for sure. I don't know how to engage in that. But Mark, we got maybe 15 minutes left or so. I want to get to all the wonderful things that you're doing, and your books are out. I've listened to all of your books, and they're fantastic. And so
thank you.
Where are you at now? What's happening? What would you like to talk about with what you're doing?
Well, I'm going to be in Houston hold on, let me get the dates. I'm going to be in Houston between February 20th and the 25th. And I'm going to be on Great Day Houston, the CBS morning show. And you can get free tickets to be on the show, but then also be doing spirit communication events at Body, Mind, and Soul of Houston. So go to my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com. On Saturday, February 15th, I'm doing a light circle event, and that's limited to 6 people. It's online. Everybody receives a reading. Then in March, I will be at the Sedona Ascension Retreat. And once again, if you go to my website, that's going to be through March 14th through the 16th. If you haven't been to Sedona, you really want to go. It is considered one of the most beautiful places on earth. It's also home to 5 major energy vortexes, which are a whirlpool of electromagnetic energy. Native Americans have considered it sacred ground for 13 centuries plus. And so that's why it's kind of a hub for people that are involved in spirituality. And I will be, once again, doing spirit communication events, and I'll be presenting a talk, Reincarnation. The subtitle is Deja Vu. Who were you before you were you? And then in May, I will be in San Rafael, California, for the New Living Expo, and that's going to be May 9th, 10th, and 11th. I could keep going on and on, but I do want to mention in August, at the end of August, Labor Day weekend, I'll be one of the keynote speakers at the International Association for Near-Death Studies 50th Anniversary Conference. And I'm very honored that they invited me to be one of their speakers. And the topic that I'll be speaking on is called Near-Death Experiences, an ancient mystery that changed the world. And I'm going to take the audience on a mystical journey through time to several key figures, political, religious, scientific, literary, musical, all of whom who had near-death experiences that literally changed the world. And then in October, I'll be in upper state New York at the Omega Institute, and I'll be giving a spirit communication events and another talk there about the science behind spirit communication. And then finally, and there's probably going to be other things too, but in November, I'll be back in Virginia Beach at the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment for the Mediumship Summit. And I will be presenting, once again, the science of spirit communication. So I have several different topics that I discuss. I do one-on-one readings. Please visit my website, afterlifefrequency.com, just like my book, Afterlife Frequency. And I invite everyone to sign up for my newsletter. That way, you'll be up to date on everything that I'm doing. Because as my mother in spirit said to me, my life's mission, Tom, is to help people understand the divine power that we call God exists, that our souls are immortal living spirits, that an afterlife exists, that we can communicate with souls, and we're going to see our loved ones again when it is our time to leave this world. Now, when I say that, don't hasten your exit from this world. And I'm not being funny or facetious. I'm on a lot of shows, and my show every Thursday, The Psychic and the Doc, and I invite all of your listeners to call in. My co-host, Dr. Pat Basili, world-renowned behavioral psychologist. We take calls from listeners. I'll do a mini reading. Dr. Pat helps people understand the metaphorical and the significance in the beauty of the messages. There's nothing like The Psychic and the Doc. We just won Best Radio Show of the Year 2 years in a row. I'm just so honored to work with Dr. Pat. And she and I look at this as our ministry. This is our ministry. That's why we devote our time. We don't get paid to be on this show. We do this because this is where our heart is. This is where our love is. And so, but we always tell people, yes, spirits are always happy. They're wonderful. We're the ones that are miserable. Okay. They're never, they're pure energy. Energy doesn't get old, sick, tired, or die, but we do. No matter how depressed you are, how miserable you think you are, do not cut your life short. You have things to do. And as dark as today may seem, tomorrow could be a lot brighter. Plus, every life matters, every life counts. We're all going to get to the other side. What's the rush? Okay. You will see your loved ones again. And through a medium like me, you can communicate with them. Or, at Tom, as you explained, you can have those experiences where you will connect with them. So you can find out about all these things by visiting my website, afterlifefrequency.com.
Yeah, lots of resources there. I am a subscriber, by the way, and so I see all those things. We're going to have the Helping Parents Heal conference is every 2 years down in Phoenix, and we're going to meet. The men's group is going to meet next August as well down there and at the same place. So I missed going to Sedona last time, and I was going to make a point of it to get there this time for sure.
Sedona is it's breathtaking. I've been all over the world, and it's definitely up there. In fact, tour agencies, they list Sedona as one of the top 10 most beautiful places on earth, and it really is. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. Have you ever been up to Lilydale, New York?
I did. I was invited to be a guest speaker up in Lilydale back in, gosh, I guess it was 2016, and I really enjoyed being able to speak there. And it's near Niagara Falls, which was kind of cool to see.
Well,
too.
that's where I am right now, Niagara Falls, and I grew
really?
up in
my
Dunkirk,
God.
New York, just outside of Lilydale, like about 5 miles away. So,
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. I really enjoyed it up there. It was fantastic, and it was neat going to Niagara Falls because that's where my parents went on their honeymoon, and it was neat. I was standing there thinking, wow, mom and dad saw this back when they were back in their early 20s.
yeah, so I'll tell you about the falls too. That I've lived here my whole life, and I was born in Buffalo, and so now I live in the city of Niagara Falls, which I've lived around the area. But I was a tour guide about 12 years ago. And so you learn all these great things about the falls, and I gained a new appreciation. But I would go there every day with these tour groups. And I got to tell you, and at that time, I wasn't into the spiritual aspect of things. But there is a spiritual essence to Niagara Falls. And when you talk about connecting with nature and everything and the intrigue, and you see the draw of people who jump and all this other stuff, I mean, you wonder about those things. But if you sit there at the edge of those falls and you sit there and just stare at it and think about things, you understand that. And there's a definite spiritual element to what's happening around Niagara Falls.
That's one of the reasons I really enjoy working with Native American spirituality. One of my dearest friends and Louise, and she's also a rocket scientist, which is really fascinating because I live near Kennedy Space Center, and a lot of my friends are scientists. And there is this respect, this love for nature, and this connection with spirituality. And Christian spirituality in its esoteric and fundamental. And when I say fundamental, I don't mean fundamentalist Christianity. I mean when you get to the root of it, is immensely spiritual. There's a respect for nature. There's a respect for each other. There's a sense of interconnectedness. And her mother died about, gosh, I guess about a year and a half ago now. Her mother, Gloria. And Louise told me that when the hospice folks came in, they said, now, this may sound strange, but people who are transitioning, and they were talking to Gloria, she was laying in bed with Louise there. Sometimes people are under the impression that, they see spirits, of their loved ones. And Louise said, we're Native Americans. Of course we see spirits.
Yes. And there's great experiences with that too. I was a hospice spiritual care director and witnessed some of those things.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. You saw things that at that time you probably didn't know how to explain, and now you do.
Yeah. I was a pastor before that, but I always thought God was bigger. And so then when I went to hospice, I experienced that. I saw it in many different cultures, many different settings. And so the spirituality really grew there. And I think it's a story in itself, the path that I've kind of gone along here with everything.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm glad that you were a pastor. I was considering going into the clergy, and I had thought about it very, very heavily because it's not unusual for mediums to be drawn to the spiritual. But I decided to go into law, but because that's where I was supposed to go.
Yeah.
That's where I was supposed to go, and I do study the Bible. I study all the religions, and you're not the first minister that I've said. That has said, God's bigger than the Bible.
Mm.
When people go, the Bible's the one thing, it's like, well, hold on. Religion is a human attempt at interphasing and understanding infinity. And to say that this way is the only way and everyone else is wrong, I think you're missing the point. The Hindus have a very fascinating saying. They say there are many paths to the top of the mountain, and the only person on the wrong path is the one running around the mountain telling everyone else they're on the wrong path.
Love it. Love it. There's humor in a lot of those old ancient texts or and sayings.
Well, it's you think about, when Jesus was speaking and Buddha, we have this, I am so spiritual. They probably did have a good sense of humor because effective public speakers will bring some humor, some levity to draw people in. If you think about the most effective speakers you see, you'll get a chuckle or two out. They're not just, I am the Son of God and you will believe. I have a hard time thinking Jesus was like that, or Buddha, because a lot of the Buddhists that I know, they revel in laughter because it's joy. It's joy. And that's what it's all about. I mean, how many times in Scripture did Jesus say, fear not? Fear not. Don't be afraid. Because that's the worst emotion, is that, or one of them is fear. Feeling, fear that your son has disintegrated into nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
That's a terrible fear. And no matter how much training and religiosity we've had and spiritual experiences, when you lose somebody that you love, that chasm opens up. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be a permanent, void, but people go through that. In my book, Never Letting Go, which is a guide on the journey through grief, doubt is part of the journey, is one of the chapters. And it was a rabbi who told me, well, how can you have faith without doubt? And then I recalled, because I remember when my mother died, how I fell into that chasm. Even though I'd grown up seeing spirits with a mom and dad that were psychic, I had those doubts because it was a human defense mechanism. It was fear. And then I woke up one night about 3 days after she died. In the middle of the night, I woke up and I heard, in dying, we were born to eternal life, which is the last line from the prayer of St. Francis. And I felt my faith return. It was such a remarkable experience. And that's why I open all of my mediumship sessions with the prayer of St. Francis. He was a cool figure. He was one of these interfaith figures. Jewish people respect him. Muslims respect him. Hindus think, well, he was just another avatar, so the Buddhists. But he taught us so many wonderful things about compassion, and that physical death is not the end of life, but rather the birth of us into eternity.
Love it. I recently reached that point of belief, and I know that my humanness will always fight that. And so that is there, but I am certain that we walk across the veil into that life. And I know Jeff's there too. So it's very exciting. And like you said, I no longer fear life. I don't fear things in life because of that. All of the things going on around us, all of the things in the world and everything, things that I will never really have the ability to ever change anyways. But I have come to a sense of peace in myself. And that's what you're talking about, inner peace and everything too. And yes, we'll move on. Mark Anthony, thank you so much. I want to respect your time, of course, and I appreciate you coming on. I could talk to you for hours, So
I'm always, if you'd like to have me back sometime, please let me know. I would be honored.
love to. Thank you, Mark. And of course, I tell everyone all the time, we'll have all the information on Mark in the show notes and everything, so you can find it there. Thanks, Mark. See you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.